Wings of Fire is a children's fantasy novel series centered around 7 major dragon tribes set on a fantasy continent named Pyrrha. Written by author Tui T. Sutherland and published by Scholastic. The Wings of Fire series currently has 3 main story arcs, each comprised of 5 books per arc, making 15 books in total, which we'll be covering today, alongside a graphic novel adaptation, 2 Legends books, and 4 winglet short stories. The series has sold over 14 million copies worldwide, and was even slated to get its own Netflix adaptation, although it was later cancelled. The point is, this is a pretty popular series, with many individuals having grown up with the books and the world of Wings of Fire. And this includes me. See, this isn't the first time I've read these books. My history with Wings of Fire goes back about 8 years, back to when I was 10. I was obsessed with dragons as a child, and when I found these books in my school library, it was love at first sight. I completely and unabashedly adored these books as a kid. I even have the fan art to prove it. I roleplayed being dragons with my friends in primary school, and would pre-order each new book and wait eagerly for it to arrive so I could enter a world of dragons once more. However, this tale does not end happily. See, this series has a multitude of both major and minor flaws, both in individual books and underlying complete arcs. Ending with one book so bad that at the ripe old age of 12, I felt so personally betrayed that I quit the series and fandom completely. So now, as a legally old person, I reread the entire series to see if 12-year-old me's opinions held up or not. And the verdict is, it was way worse than I remembered. This is a tale of editing issues, many consistency errors, inconsistent characterization, outright character assassination, and even downright harmful messaging. This is the tale of Wings of Fire. The Wings of Fire series is set in a large continent called Pyrrha, which is shaped like a dragon and is separated into 7 major kingdoms, each of which is inhabited by one of 7 different dragon tribes. Each tribe has its own palace, kingdom, traditions, and society, and are each ruled by a queen. First, we have the Mudwings, who live in the Mud Kingdom and are adapted to living a semi-aquatic lifestyle in swamps and bogs. They can breathe fire when warm, hold their breath for up to an hour, and are generally stockier and larger than other tribes. Some Mudwings are even born with fire-resistant scales. Mudwings are also the forgotten stepchild of the series, so we don't really know shit about them. Then we have the Skywings, who live in the Sky Kingdom and are a more conventional or stereotypical Western dragon. They have larger wings than other tribes and are faster flyers. They can breathe fire, and have better eyesight on average than other dragon tribes. Rarely, Skywings can be born with fire scales, a condition where a dragon has too much fire to the point where it exudes from their scales and they burn everything they touch. It is Skywing law for dragonets born with fire scales to be killed soon after hatching. The Sandwings, who live in the Sand Kingdom and are adapted to living in the desert, and as such can tolerate harsh temperatures and survive on little water and food. They also have better hearing and smell than other tribes, can breathe fire, and have a barbed tail like a scorpion that can eject a deadly venom. The Seawings, who live in the Sea Kingdom and are adapted to living primarily underwater. They have gills and regular lungs, have good night vision, and strong tails and webbed feet for swimming. They also have bioluminescent markings alongside their body and wings that can be lit up at will, and are used to communicate underwater in a language called aquatic. Seawings within or related to the royal family also have a distinct pattern of bioluminescent markings that can be used to differentiate them from other Seawing bloodlines. The Icewings, who live in the Ice Kingdom and are adapted to living in Arctic environments. They can survive extreme cold and bright light. They have serrated claws, good eyesight like Skywings, and can breathe out frost breath, which freezes anything it touches. The RainWings, who live in the Rain Kingdom and are adapted to live in the rainforest. They have long prehensile tails, Their scales are capable of changing colour and they are able to camouflage into their environments. They are also able to spit out a deadly venom from their fangs, however it is incredibly rare for RainWings to ever use their venom on other dragons or animals. And finally, the Nightwings, who live in the Night Kingdom, of which the location is currently unknown, and are adapted to be nocturnal and as such blend into darkness easily and have good night vision. They can also breathe fire, predict the future, and read minds. Another major player in this world is the concept of animus magic. Rarely dragons are born with animus magic, which is the ability to enchant inanimate objects or even living things to do literally whatever you want. For example, an animus could enchant a piece of jewelry to give them super strength or magic up an entire palace from almost nothing. This ability is hereditary and can be passed through families. However, not every tribe has animus dragons. Icewings and Sandwings have had animus dragons in the past but haven't had any in thousands of years. Nightwings and Seawings still have animus dragons, RainWings and Mudwings don't have them and never did, and Skywings did naturally have the gene but purposefully eradicated it because they deemed it too dangerous to exist. Our story begins with a death. 20 years ago, Queen Oasis, ruler of the Sandwings, was killed by a group of scavengers, aka humans. No, I don't know why they're in this story either, but point is, bro is pretty dead. Fortunately, the queen had 3 living heirs, Burn, Blister, and Blaze. You might think, hey, queen's dead, just pass the throne onto the eldest daughter and move on, right? Wrong. See, in Dragon Society, to become queen, you don't just take the throne once the current ruler dies. You need to kill the current queen in a battle to the death. Pretty metal, right? Anyway, since none of her daughters had killed her, who should be queen? Cue the start of Dragon World War, with each sister fighting for her chance to be ruler. Burn, known for her strength and ruthlessness, allied with the Skywings and Mudwings. Blister, known for her manipulative nature and intelligence, allied with the Seawings. And Blaze, known for being nice but also being an idiot, with the Icewings and most of the Sandwings. After 8 years of non-stop war, Q, a fated prophecy, calling for a group of 5 dragons born on the brightest night. 1 Seawing, 1 Nightwing, 1 Skywing, wait, that's not a Skywing, 1 Mudwing, and 1 Sandwing, who are collectively the Dragonettes of Destiny, fated to end the war and bring peace to the world. Soon after, the Talons of Peace, who are a secret group of dragons from several different tribes, all united in their mission to end the war through fulfilling the Dragonette prophecy, formed, with its members seeking out and retrieving the eggs that fit the prophecy. Once acquired, the Dragonettes were then raised by 3 members of the Talons of Peace: Dune the Sandwing, Kestrel the Skywing, and Webs the Seawing. Unfortunately, Dune and Kestrel are emotionally and physically abusive to the Dragonettes, and Webs does absolutely nothing about it, top-tier parenting as you can see, causing the Dragonettes, of which have suffered for 6 years trapped in a cave, to finally launch their escape, thus kickstarting their journey across the continent in an effort to both escape their guardians and previous life, but also try and find their families and tribes, and maybe even end the war along the way. Generally, I think this arc is okay. It definitely has some harmful messages and undertones in there, alongside some questionable narrative surrounding abuse, but there are also some nice things about it as well. The setting and concept are very fun. The first 2 books are executed quite well for what they're aiming to be, with book 2 in particular being quite a decent read, at least in my opinion. Overall, I'd probably rate it a 5 or 6 out of 10. Now, we will be heading into spoiler territory past this for things I thought were particularly poorly done, in no particular order, with the exception of one thing that I really liked. So spoilers for the entirety of the first 5 books from this point on. So the catalyst for this entire arc, the Dragonet prophecy, of which the entire story's premise hinges on, may be one of the dumbest things in this whole series. Let me explain. The prophecy, which was foretold by the Nightwings, who are constructed as mysterious, powerful, and menacing as they're rarely seen in Pyrrha, and basically everything about them is unknown to other tribes. We finally get to learn more about them in Book 4, The Dark Secret, when Starflight is kidnapped by the Nightwings for the second time, where we learn not only that the supposedly all-powerful Nightwings live on a shitty-ass volcano with barely any food and no clean air, and that everyone there hates their life, but that both the Dragonet prophecy and the Nightwing's power of foresight and mind-reading were completely made up. The whole fated destiny our main character's story has been built on is a complete lie. You might now be thinking, why would they make up an entire prophecy? Well, get ready for one of the dumbest and most contrived plotlines I've read recently. So they create the prophecy specifically with the aim of being able to engineer the Sandwing successor through the Dragonets of Destiny. Because if everyone else believes that they do have prophetic powers, and thus that the prophecy is real, then when the Fire Dragonets do come along, they will ideally side with the Dragonets' decision, which is actually the Nightwing's decision as to who the Sandwing Queen should be. And keep in mind, in order to maintain this facade, they were willing to kill Glory to replace with Flame, a Skywing, so the prophecy rings true to what they said. They sent out assassins to kill important generals and leaders whenever a particular side looked like it was going to win, to purposefully prolong a major war for years so it would fit their prophecy. And they forced dragon children to undergo the immense danger and pressure associated with finally ending the war. So you might be thinking, dang, they must have a pretty compelling reason to do all these awful things, right? No, of course not. The reason they wanted to pick the new queen was so that they could use the help of the Sandwing army of whichever princess agreed to their plans in order to kill or enslave the RainWings who live in the rainforest so that they could live there instead. Why is this incredibly stupid? Because the RainWings are notoriously friendly, unaggressive, and welcome to strangers. Which means the Nightwings could have moved into the rainforest with no issues like a decade ago, and the RainWings would not have cared at all. Which means that they prolonged a war by several years, allowing hundreds of more dragons to die, kept their tribe ill and suffering on a volcano for an extra decade, kidnapped and experimented on RainWing so their invasion would go better, and exploited dragon children for their own bidding, for literally no f***ing reason because... just because, I guess? And even ignoring the dumb reason it was made in the first place, the fact that their entire master plan hinges on the equivalent of a bunch of children not only listening to them to follow their plan, but being able to survive in a world where several powerful individuals are very happy to have them killed, is completely laughable. Like, who thought that that was going to work? Whoever it was deserved to get exploded in that volcano eruption. One of the key abilities of the RainWing tribe is that they can change the color of their scales to camouflage into their environment, rendering them invisible to the untrained eye. However, the way RainWing camouflage actually works is inconsistent. In the first book, Glory has to close her eyes to fully camouflage, which implies RainWings can't change the color of their eyes. But then in later books, being book 3 and onwards, RainWings have no issue with camouflaging with their eyes open. Which is odd, as their eyes look structurally the same as other tribes, so it doesn't really make sense that they also have the ability to change color. Further, how do their horns and claws camouflage? Typically hard bony structures like this are made of keratin, which is comprised of dead cells, at least at their outer surface. It's what makes them tough and hard. Keratin is composed of hard and dead material, the cells aren't alive. Thus, camouflage shouldn't be possible, as the ability to change color in animals, such as a chameleon, which is both the closest analogy to RainWings and is what they were primarily based on, is controlled by cells changing the concentration of pigment granules, otherwise called melanophore cells, within the cell itself. The pigment granules change in concentration to give the appearance of a different external color, changing the appearance of the animal. This requires live cells. Therefore, RainWing shouldn't be able to change the color of their horns and claws. Interesting tidbit though. Chameleons don't actually change their color to match their environment. It's used to externally communicate inward changes, as chameleons change color according to temperature and hormonal changes. So a better analogy might be the cuttlefish, who do camouflage into their environment for survival. But cuttlefish utilize chromatophores to change color, which are only found in cephalopods, which RainWings aren't. Cuttlefish can also alter their texture, which RainWings also can't do. But even if RainWings have the more advanced camouflage like cuttlefish, it still doesn't change the fact that their horns, eyes, and claws should not logically be able to change color. I know. I probably shouldn't be using actual science to discuss a children's fantasy series, but I'd argue they mention science first, with Starflight discussing evolution and antibodies in Book 4. But moving on from that, the characterization of the RainWings as a tribe is also somewhat confusing and inconsistent. At first, they are depicted as lazy, careless, naive, and somewhat hedonistic. When Glory tries to discover who her family is when she first arrives in the Rain Kingdom, she finds out that RainWings both don't have conventional families, nor do they count their eggs. It was worse than she'd feared. Her tribe was too lazy to even count their own eggs. RainWings are further depicted as ignorant, with Glory pondering how, when talking to Jambu, that he had no questions for her and that he didn't ask about the world beyond the rainforest. This constructs the RainWings to be small-minded and ignorant, only caring about or understanding their own world and society, and not bothering to look beyond that. Further, when it's revealed that several RainWings have gone missing, a majority of the tribe just doesn't care, with Queen Magnificent saying in surprise to Mangrove upon discovering he'd counted 12 missing RainWings. Someone's been counting? Who has that kind of energy? Further reinforcing this lazy and self-centered construction. Then near the end of Book 3, when Glory challenges the current RainWing queens, to clarify, the RainWings at the time did not have one set queen nor an official royal family. Any interested female dragon could ask to be added to the roster of queens, where she shall act as queen for an allotted time period, which they then rotate through. So Glory challenges for the throne to be hers alone, in an effort to save the RainWings who are currently stuck prisoner in the Night Kingdom, as the RainWing queens don't want to have to do anything about it. At this moment, this lazy construction changes. During the Royal Challenge, which for RainWings is non-lethal and involves competing in different tasks chosen by the current ruler, or in this case rulers, such as fruit picking, races, camouflage challenges, and venom spitting challenges, where the RainWing queens set up an elaborate scheme to purposefully screw over Glory, and then also went out of their way to cheat at literally every task, a good chunk of which was pre-planned. So the RainWings are too lazy to go help their own tribe, but then suddenly turn into Machiavellian villains when Glory challenges them. Because why? Boy oh boy, do I love unexplained character changes that are done solely to add more drama to a book even when it doesn't make any fucking sense. If you want a character to be vain, self-centered, and uncaring towards others, construct them to be that way from the start, or provide proper foreshadowing so that the character change feels believable. For example of the queens we did see, which was just Magnificent, she was shown to be uncaring, lazy, and somewhat idiotic. But she was never portrayed as scheming or villainous until the last second when it suited the narrative. Don't pull a 180 last minute just because you wrote yourself into a corner. Like a lot of fiction these days, there's a lot of unnecessary romance in these books. Literally every main character gets a love interest. Like genuinely every single one of them. And almost none of them are executed well. The pairings felt rushed, with characters liking each other almost immediately, with no actual established reasoning for why this occurred. They also often felt forced into the story, almost purely just so that every character could have a love interest, which was necessary for some reason, and generally didn't add anything interesting to the story. You can make all the love interests platonic friends, and the story would probably be better. There was only one romantic subplot that I think actually justified its existence in this entire arc, which I will be getting into, but first I'm going to dive into what I think is the most egregiously bad of the primary ships, Glorybringer. The romantic relationship between Glory and Deathbringer, generally referred to by the fandom as Glorybringer, suffers from many of the same issues as most of the romantic pairings in this series. It felt quite forced. The two characters are immediately interested in each other romantically, even though it doesn't really make much sense, and their first interactions, for Glory in particular, felt completely out of character. See, generally, Glory is more cautious and more suspicious than most of the other dragonettes, especially towards Nightwings, which Deathbringer is, considering all the shit they've put her in particular through. Being the tribe that was willing to let her be killed for not being a Skywing, and willing to abandon all of the dragonettes except for Starflight and Scarlet's Arena. So some quick context for when Glory and Deathbringer meet for the first time. The dragonettes are currently hiding out in the outskirts between the Ice Kingdom and the Sand Kingdom, as they are being hunted down by several dragon queens and other powerful individuals at this point in the story. But then Glory sees Deathbringer in the distance and chooses to approach him because she's curious? So she risked revealing both her and the other dragonette's location just for curiosity's sake? Seriously? There was no compelling reason for her to do this other than an excuse to introduce Glory's already unnecessary love interest into the story. Even the way Glory views Deathbringer feels unrealistic. When she first sees him, he's described as wiry and graceful in his movements, and that the silver scales sparkling under his wings caught the morning light like trapped stars. So he's described with words like graceful, which has positive connotations and is associated with beauty and poise. Alongside the use of the sentence, silver scales sparkling under his wings caught the morning light like trapped stars, which utilizes alliteration in silver scales sparkling alongside simile in like trapped stars to evoke strong positive imagery conveying Deathbringer's beauty to the audience. This constructs him as beautiful and dazzling. But it doesn't make sense for Glory to view Nightwing like this immediately upon meeting. Nightwings are associated with danger and suspicion in Glory's mind at this time, and this should be reflected in the figurative and descriptive language used to describe them through her perspective. Further, it is later revealed that Deathbringer is a Nightwing assassin sent to kill the faulty Dragonettes of Destiny so that they can be replaced with the more agreeable alternates. Which includes killing Glory, by the way. He then decides, basically purely because he finds Glory to be pretty, that he won't kill the Dragonettes of Destiny, but will kill Blaze, one of the Sandwing heirs, instead. Which already feels kind of icky, but don't worry, it gets worse. In the process of attacking Blaze, he injures Tsunami. The second disc sliced through the edge of one of Tsunami's wings as she leapt in front of Blaze. Tsunami collapsed, clutching her injured wing. Now, in previous books, when a dragon threatened the life of her friends, she killed them. For example, in Book 1, when Glory killed Fjord in Scarlet's Arena to save Clay's life. So following this, Deathbringer probably should have died. And to add insult to injury, just 2 pages later, he's talking with Glory about how he's supposed to kill the Dragonettes of Destiny, her friends, but it's treated as cute and flirtatious, which is just gross. So let's recap here. He's an assassin who's killed several dragons. He was sent to kill her and some of her friends. He attempted to kill someone right in front of them. And he was even part of the RainWing abduction program, where Nightwings kidnapped RainWings into the Night Kingdom so that they could be experimented on, and yet he is still Glory's love interest. How delightful. Additionally, in Arc 2, Book 7, their relationship shows unhealthy qualities. As seen on page 54, Deathbringer puts extra guards on Glory without talking to her, even though it's implied she doesn't want them, which feels mildly controlling, but then later on page 66, and I quote, "By yourself," he roared at Glory, "with 3 little dragonettes to protect you?" So quick context. Glory, alongside some of the Arc 2 protagonists, are searching the rainforest for a dangerous Icewing who has been sent to kill Queen Glory as revenge for ex-Queen Scarlet, who is angry because Glory melted her face off with her venom. She did this without Deathbringer, who appointed himself as her main bodyguard, and when they come back, he is incredibly upset with her for going without him, even though she had an entire team of camouflaged RainWing bodyguards following her. He's literally described as roaring at her, which is a word associated with explosive anger, violent predators, which is kind of funny because Deathbringer is also kind of a predator in the other sense as well, but we'll get to that, and fear for the recipient. And I'll be honest, I felt scared when I reread that scene now as an adult. Whilst the text frames this as overprotective concern, it is not a normal or healthy response. Concern is, "Are you okay? I was so worried about you." Not ferociously yelling at someone for daring to have autonomy over their own actions. This kind of interaction is not normal and should not be sold to children as healthy or as something to emulate. And now moving on to the predator part. See, as it turns out, Deathbringer's canonical age when he meets Glory is 12 to 13 years old, to Glory's 6. Funky thing about dragon aging is that dragons aren't considered adults until they're about 7. Which means not only was Deathbringer twice her age when they met, but that Glory was also a minor. Now I should add that there is evidence that Deathbringer's age was a mistake, and that he was originally supposed to be around Glory's age, which I do believe. However, even if it was by accident, it doesn't change the fact that the series canonically depicts a very unhealthy age gap, and that deserves to be discussed. Because it is absolutely not okay for adults to flirt with and enter romantic relationships with teenagers and children. I've heard some fans argue that dragon society is different, so it's fine. Or that Glory's an adult now, so it's all hunky-dory. I don't believe these arguments hold up. Dragons are almost exactly like people are, and even if they weren't, we read the series through the perspective of being human and through the norms of our society. And if a 30-year-old was dating a 19-year-old now, it doesn't change the fact that it wouldn't be okay if they started dating when the 19-year-old was 16. And even then, if I did see a 19-year-old and a 30-year-old dating, even though it is legal and they are 2 adults, I'd still side-eye the 30-year-old when I crossed the street. The fact is, the series, inadvertently or not, romanticizes and endorses an inappropriate relationship, and that isn't okay. Especially when the series is aimed at and targeted at a young and impressionable audience. This isn't to say that people who do like this ship are bad, or that the author condones grooming, but instead that this pairing definitely warrants critical evaluation towards the harmful messages about relationships it may be conveying. Now, onto the one romantic subplot that I think was genuinely good, which was the handling of Starflight's crush on Sunny throughout the series. Unlike basically every ship in this arc, it was actually developed and built up through several books, with hints and foreshadowing present in earlier books, so his feelings don't feel like they magically come out of nowhere just to make the plot juicier. And most importantly, it actually added something meaningful to the story. As you probably know, in most mainstream media, the good guy gets the girl, almost as a narrative reward for his goodness. Starflight is nice, smart, and morally good as a character, so when it's revealed that he's in love with Sunny and has been for years, it is assumed that they will get together. Except that they don't. Starflight is a genuinely good guy, but that doesn't mean he deserves Sunny's love. Sunny does not owe him reciprocal romantic feelings just because he is a good individual. This concept is nicely explored in Sunny's book, The Brightest Night. In the book, Sunny grapples with the fact that while she doesn't have romantic feelings for Starflight, she feels internally obligated to like him back because she doesn't want to hurt his feelings. Eventually, she comes to the conclusion that she doesn't love him back, and that's okay, because love is not something that is owed, but something that is given freely. This is further reinforced by Starflight's acceptance of this. He isn't angry at Sunny for not reciprocating his feelings, nor does he demand she do so. He's upset about it, sure, but he never pushes anything onto Sunny. I think this is genuinely great. Not only does it depict an issue relevant to the younger target audience, being the complexities of romantic feelings and love among friends, alongside how someone might feel obligated to falsely reciprocate these feelings out of guilt, it does so in a healthy and respectful way. Starflight emulates a healthy way to deal with rejection, alongside conveying that not everyone is going to like you back, and that's okay. And in contrast, through Sunny, that you shouldn't feel guilty for not liking someone back, and that you don't owe anyone your feelings, no matter how nice, or kind, or smart they are. This is especially good considering how much mainstream media and even societal expectations at large argue the opposite, particularly for women and girls, which is why it's so important to have representation like this in media. Overall, great message and good execution. There's only one problem. Fatespeaker, who is the alternate Nightwing Dragonet of Destiny, available to replace Starflight if it was deemed necessary by the Nightwings, she's first introduced in the prologue of Book 3, but first becomes a major character in Book 4, The Dark Secret. The decision to turn Fatespeaker into Starflight's love interest was an unfortunate one. To start, she, like the other love interests, likes Starflight almost immediately for no established reason. Additionally, this dilutes from the impact of Sunny's rejection of Starflight, with Sunny stating that he still has Fatespeaker. Therefore, she feels better about rejecting him. I have a problem with this. Firstly, because Sunny never should have had to have felt guilty about rejecting Starflight in the first place. Again, hate to sound like a broken record, but nobody is owed anyone's feelings and nobody should be made to feel guilty for not liking someone back. And secondly, because Fatespeaker is constructed almost as a consolation prize for Starflight not ending up with Sunny. In the text, Fatespeaker is repeatedly compared to Sunny. Fatespeaker gave Starflight an enormous smile that reminded him of Sunny. The tone of her voice reminded him again so much of Sunny that he couldn't say no to her. Glory describes Sunny and Fatespeaker as twin souls, and Starflight even ends up mistaking Fatespeaker for Sunny at the end of Book 4. This characterizes Fatespeaker to be quite similar to Sunny, both in personality but also in mannerisms. This is weird, especially considering how when Sunny rejects Starflight, Fatespeaker's affection for him is repeatedly brought up. It's like Starflight gets bootleg Sunny as consolation for not actually getting Sunny. This may also imply the only reason Starflight would be interested in Fatespeaker is because she reminds him of Sunny, which is yucky. Further, Fatespeaker's affection also feels somewhat forced onto Starflight as well, with the implication in the story being that Starflight should be with Fatespeaker because he didn't get Sunny, even if he doesn't act interested in Fatespeaker at all. Overall, this mishandling of the situation is really unfortunate, at least in my eyes, as Fatespeaker and Starflight are both quite interesting on their own, and Fatespeaker being reduced to Starflight's love interest past Book 4 was a sad turn of events for both her and Starflight's characters. Thorn is an adult sandwing introduced in Book 5. She's the leader of the Outlaws, which is the dominant group within the Scorpion Den, which is more or less a crime den located in the Sand Kingdom. She's also later revealed to be Sunny's mother. She's depicted to be a strong, fair, and good-natured leader, and a loving, caring mother towards Sunny. But her worst traits and actions, like how she technically is the leader of a crime gang, and the fact that she murdered someone for no reason, are completely swept under the rug or outright portrayed as justifiable. So for some context, in Book 5, Thorn interrogates 3 Nightwings after they enter the Scorpion Den. Fierce Teeth, Strong Wings, and Prey Hunter, as they are trying to get a message to Burn about the whereabouts of the Dragonets of Destiny. She rebuffs their offer and asks about Moreira, the Nightwing who primarily formed the fake prophecy, who she hates, because he told Thorn that the reason Stonemover disappeared was her fault. To clarify, Stonemover was Thorn's previous partner and Sunny's father. Prey Hunter then tells her the truth that Moreira is dead. She then, like a logical and good-natured individual, leapt off the dais, seized Prey Hunter by the throat and flung him to the ground, where she pinned him with her claws and swung her tail over his heart. And then when Prey Hunter, who is understandably scared for his life, convulsed and lashed out, slicing at Thorn's underbelly with his sharp talons, she immediately stabs him in the heart with her barb and kills him. And then Prey Hunter is treated as the bad guy, with Sunny thinking the world is better off that way. Which is disturbing for a couple of reasons. One, Sunny is characterized as the kind, empathetic one, which means the readers are encouraged to view her opinions on other dragons as the right or just option, which sets us up to want to agree with Sunny and thus agreeing that Prey Hunter should have died. Second, since we barely knew Prey Hunter in the narrative, to definitively say the world is better off with him dead feels unnecessarily cruel. But wait, it gets worse, because Sunny then goes on to think if he hadn't lashed out at her, then maybe he wouldn't have been killed. Nice victim blaming, Sunny. You might then be thinking, dang, that's kinda bad, don't worry, it gets worse again. With Sunny then thinking, maybe she had to make sure the other Nightwings know how serious and dangerous she is. This sentence is purposefully used to attempt to recontextualize Thorn's active choice to kill someone as justified and necessary from the viewer's perspective, in order to frame Thorn as a character that the readers should root for, and as a strong, decisive leader. So not only is the murder victim, Prey Hunter, treated like his death was deserved, the text itself tries to manipulate you through lexical choices to make you intrigued about and eventually to root for his murderer. Further, at later points in the story, Sunny thinks she wanted to throw things and yell like her mother did when she was angry. A great influence on her child, as you can see. Thorn is later rewarded by the narrative by becoming the new Queen of the Sandwings at the end of Book 5, a choice I disagree with and will get into in a later section. Now let's contrast this with Stonemover. Stonemover is an adult Nightwing and is also an animus, which, as mentioned earlier, is a dragon who can enchant objects and living things to do whatever they want. However, it is said to be at the price of losing a bit of their soul each time they make an enchantment. Out of fear he was going to turn evil, he enchanted his scales to slowly turn to stone whenever he used his magic instead of using up his soul. As a result, he can't move anymore and is more or less paralysed. He currently resides in a cave in Jade Mountain. And how is he treated? Awfully, of course. Sunny describes him as looking pathetic and sad due to being unable to move. She gets mad at him for not actively seeking out her mother, thinking, why didn't he care more? Why hadn't he tried harder? Which is incredibly unfair considering he literally can't fucking move. The line in particular, why hadn't he tried harder, is also kind of triggering from a disability standpoint, as the sentence implies that Stonemover isn't disabled, but simply isn't trying hard enough. This shouldn't need to be said, but you can't girl boss your way out of being disabled by trying harder. Trust me, I've tried, and to imply you can is invalidating, ignorant, and hurtful. Further, after leaving the cave her father is in, Sunny thinks to herself, now that I've met both of them, I know which one I want to be like. I'm not going to sit in a cave and mope because things aren't the way I want them to be. Characterizing Stonemover as sitting around and moping is again unfair considering that Stonemover can't move. Even later, Sunny thinks that Stonemover was disappointing, but he was still her father. Lovely. And also, just unfair. Stonemover is quite nice in all the interactions he had with Sunny, and he never did anything particularly wrong other than be exploited by his own tribe. In fact, Sunny seems to have a more sympathetic opinion of Smolder than of Stonemover. I should be mad at him, too, Sunny thought, but she couldn't be. He wasn't evil, he wasn't even mean, and that she shouldn't like him, but she did anyway. And this is the dragon who kidnapped her, then trapped her in a dungeon so that Byrne could stuff her and shove her into her wheeling tower, then recaptures her and her mother after Thorn comes to rescue her, and is again willing to let them die. This harsh dichotomy that is constructed in the text between Thorn and Stonemover reinforces several ableist beliefs, with the text implying that it's better to be an ambitious criminal than to be a disappointing, paralysed individual. The alternate Dragonets of Destiny are a group of 5 Dragonets born around the time of the Brightest Night. Like this arc's main characters, the alternate Dragonets of Destiny were also raised by the Talons of Peace and hidden from the rest of the world. The alternates were available so faulty or useless members, as deemed by the Nightwings of course, of the original Dragonets of Destiny could be replaced if necessary. The alternates consisted of Ochre the Mudwing, Viper the Sandwing, Fatespeaker the Nightwing, Squid the Seawing, and Flame the Skywing. In the text, the alternate Dragonets of Destiny are generally all depicted as angry, disagreeable, and selfish, with the exception of Fatespeaker, who is portrayed as delusional but not malicious. In Book 5, Sunny describes Ochre as that he was like the not funny, not adorable opposite of Clay. Constantly hungry, but in a pushy way instead of a sweetly embarrassed way. This sums up my issues with the alternates pretty well. The alternates are the originals, but bad. That's it. The alternates are never given the chance to be anything more than weak villains, which is disappointing, both in being auto-wasted potential as characters. As much like the original Dragonets of Destiny, they were also taken from their families and suffered under the Talons of Peace, but also in the underlying and harmful trend that they represent. See, if you've read the books, you're probably thinking that the alternates did do some genuinely bad things, and some of them are by action villains. And you're right. I agree with you, hypothetical viewer. I'll even be the first person to say that Flame sounds like a school shooter in Arc 2. So why is it a problem that they're all treated as villains? Well, the problem isn't that these specific individual characters are made to be villains. The problem is that every character who reacts to their abuse with anger or bitterness or general maladjustment is constructed to be a villain. And this is even seen in main characters like Glory and Tsunami, who, whilst not treated as villains, are seen as bad for not caring about the well-being of their abusive guardians. This is infuriating, as these characters are justifiably angry. Tsunami and Glory are well within their right to not care if one of their abusers is dying. That doesn't make them bad, or mean, or cruel. But the text, and through characters like Sunny in particular, treats them as if they are. Further, the alternates, who are more than likely products of their environment, are treated as if they are immutable and unchangeable assholes. This is an issue because if you vilify every single character who responds to negative events with anger, you vilify anger itself. And this is bad. Anger is not an inherently bad emotion. Getting angry, particularly in response to abuse, doesn't make someone bad, or selfish, or evil. Experiencing anger in response to wrongdoing is both a pretty normal and often healthy response. Anger helps the wronged individual correctly identify that they are being treated badly and reinforce that they are not to blame for what happened to them. Further, this reinforces the unfair expectation for children to experience abuse and still turn out 100% fine otherwise they're a lost cause and doomed to be bad people. Unfortunately, this message is quite common in media, with characters who are angry at those who wronged them being treated as if their anger is unhealthy, unnecessary, and out of control, often making them tortured villains who must be converted by the main protagonist, who is someone who reacted well to their trauma, into the life of kindness and compassion, even for those who hurt them. I dislike this because first, the good response held up by many main characters in media, which is to become kind and empathetic to a fault, to the point where the MC seems to value their own autonomy and happiness so little that everyone else's takes precedence. Whilst this response is presented as selfless, valiant, and virtuous, it isn't healthy. Valuing your own happiness and maintaining your own boundaries is not a bad thing, no matter how much society and media tries to argue otherwise. Of course, anger can absolutely be very unhealthy and very harmful to both the individual and those around them. But if anger is only ever associated with villains, then rightful and healthy anger is also villainized in the process. This puts the unnecessary and unfair expectation to never feel a normal and often helpful human emotion onto the very real people who read and consume media like this. Firstly, the big plan to solve the war was to contact all three heirs, lead them all to the same place at the same time, and then hope for the best? Bruh. Say what you will, that was dumb as hell. Second, Byrne died way too quickly for how menacing she was characterized to be. Byrne was described as huge, imposing, and ruthless as a character. We even witnessed this in the very first prologue of the series, where she has absolutely no issues throwing a nearly hatched egg off a cliff, killing the dragonette inside, and then murdering a guy. This cruel and heartless depiction is even conveyed through her Wheeling Tower as well, where she collects living creatures, kills them, and then stuffs them, just because they look weird. But then she just gets killed by Blister's Dragonbite Vipers. And she's the first of the sisters to die as well, which felt really underwhelming. The twist of there being two Vipers also felt kind of dumb. Like, just read the shit. But also, since we see through Sunny, the Vipers are delivered several days prior, when she was first imprisoned in the Wheeling Tower. And I'm wondering, first, how did the snakes not die from lack of oxygen considering they were stuck in a closed box for an unknown amount of time? And second, they're shown to be quite aggressive, so why didn't they attack each other while in the box? Make it make sense, please. The Eye of Onyx then vaporizing Blister was kind of fun, but the Eye of Onyx, which is an Animus enchanted item, was not introduced well at all. How it works and its function in the story are incredibly confusing. Like, anyone who wears it can be queen? Okay, then what's the point of having a royal family if anyone could sneak in and take it? Further, if it has the power to pick the best queen, then why isn't it used every time a queen dies to find the best queen out of all of the Sandwings, instead of just picking a new royal line every now and then? Also, let's be real, if, as the text says, whoever wears the Eye of Onyx is queen, it would have been destroyed or hidden by a previous monarch who didn't want to risk someone stealing it and then potentially taking the throne. And the fact that it's just found last minute and used to make Thorn queen instead of any of the sisters was such a cop-out. Further, how did Sunny supposedly know that Thorn was the best choice? Thorn was the only other adult female Sandwing Sunny had ever met that wasn't one of the three sisters. Yet she's so sure that she's the best option out of all of the Sandwings? How? My thoughts on Thorn should be pretty clear based on previous sections, but she's a criminal and a murderer. She shouldn't be considered the good option here. And then everyone is just fine with Thorn being queen? Are you seriously going to tell me everyone is fine with her being queen and nobody is mad at all that it made the 20-year war they were in even more unnecessary than it already was? Solid! Because remember kids, the true Sandwing queen wasn't Blister, Byrne, or Blaze. It was the friends we made along the way. This marks the end of my critique. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you. I really appreciate it. I will also be covering Arcs 2 and 3 of this series, with Arc 2 hopefully coming out soon. Again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day.